NASCAR is in one of its most uncertain times in decades. For years, the series has faced challenges, but 2025 feels different. The heart of the problem is the undeniable fact that some of the sport's biggest names are openly criticizing the very product that NASCAR is trying to sell. So, what is really going on with the sport's struggles, and how does Tony Stewart's major news play into this bigger picture? Let's try to answer that question in today's episode. The current generation of cars was introduced with the hope of saving costs, improving parity, and modernizing the racing product. But over time, many problems have come to the surface. Some drivers argue that these cars are too equal, that skill is not rewarded the way it once was, and that the racing feels artificial. The media, which often defended NASCAR in the past, is beginning to join the circus of critics. When respected journalists like Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi on their show, The Teardown, suggest that it's time for a new race car, that's not a small comment. It means that the shield NASCAR had in the press is no longer reliable. The spark that lit up this wave of criticism came from Shane Van Gisbergen, better known as SVG. At Watkins Glen, he won a cup race by 11 seconds, which in modern NASCAR terms is a landslide. In earlier times, NASCAR often reacted to dominance by changing the rules. Anytime one driver, whether it was Jeff Gordon in the 1990s or Jimmy Johnson in the 2000s, seemed to control the sport, NASCAR looked for ways to tighten the competition. That same reaction is now expected. Many fans and insiders believe that SVG will not be allowed to repeat such dominance without NASCAR stepping in. Yet, instead of celebrating how incredible his driving skills are, many in the sport have turned the conversation into one about flaws in the car. Kevin Harvick made a good point when he said that NASCAR used to celebrate greatness. Instead of doing that now, critics act as if greatness itself is a problem. But the issue runs deeper than one race or one driver. When names like Denny Hamlin, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and respected veterans like Mark Martin openly say the product is broken, the message reaches far and wide. These are not random voices. These are people that carry influence with fans, sponsors, and media. When they say the cars aren't good, the audience listens. The image becomes that of a restaurant with its most loyal chefs and waiters telling customers that the food is spoiled. That's not sustainable for any business, especially a sport that depends heavily on fan trust and loyalty. The business side is where things get even more complicated. NASCAR has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the next-gen car. Teams have also spent enormous sums adapting to it. The idea that NASCAR will suddenly abandon it is unrealistic. Too much money has been spent, which means the solution is not to scrap the car, but to make changes that calm the criticism and improve the racing. Some insiders predict that horsepower will be increased. Right now, the cars run around 670 horsepower on most tracks. If NASCAR decides to add another 100 horsepower, the racing may look more exciting and drivers may feel like their skill matters more. That kind of adjustment could be enough to silence some critics without completely starting over. Still, even with possible changes, timing matters. The playoffs are beginning, and NASCAR cannot afford to admit to major problems in the middle of its biggest stretch of the season. To do so would risk undermining the championship itself. Fans might see the winner as someone who only benefited from a broken system. That's why many believe that NASCAR will stay quiet for now and make an announcement after the season ends. Once the champion is crowned, leadership can step forward and promise improvements for 2026. The danger is that silence also carries risks. If NASCAR does not act, the negativity can grow. Social media amplifies every complaint, and while executives may dismiss it as white noise, the truth is that even the highest CEOs read it at home. They know their product is being trashed in public. That's what makes this period different from earlier times. In the past, unhappy fans wrote letters or complained at the track. Today, criticism spreads instantly across millions of screens. When Dale Jr. tweets about car problems, it's seen by more people in an hour than a press release can reach in a week. What happens next will determine NASCAR's long-term health. If changes are made, such as more horsepower or modifications to aerodynamics, the series could win back trust. But if nothing happens, the risk of losing fans grows. Numbers already show that NASCAR attendance and TV ratings have declined compared to the peak years of the early 2000s. Back then, races at places like Bristol or Talladega would sell out with 160,000 fans. Now, some tracks struggle to fill half that number. Television numbers once reached 8 to 10 million viewers for big events. Today, a strong race may draw 3 million. That drop cannot be ignored. Now let's talk about the situation with Tony Stewart, who has won 3 NASCAR Cup Series championships. He was one of the few drivers who could move between open-wheel cars, stock cars, and dirt sprint cars and still find success. Stewart retired from full-time NASCAR competition in 2016, but remained active as a team owner in both NASCAR and dirt track racing. He also began running his own sprint cars, entering them in the World of Outlaws competition with drivers like Schatz, Kerry Madsen, and others at different times. Stewart's involvement gave credibility and resources to his team, while Schatz's ability brought results. For a while, the partnership seemed perfect. However, even the greatest drivers eventually faced decline. Schatz, after years of dominance, began to see his performance level off. He still won races, but the streaks of 20-win seasons slowed. His finishes at major races like the Knoxville Nationals were no longer automatic podiums. In 2023, for example, Schatz finished outside the top 10 more often than usual, and by 2024, his struggles became more noticeable. In the 2024 Knoxville Nationals, Schatz did qualify for the main event, but only managed an 11th place finish. For a driver with 9 previous wins at Knoxville, simply making the race was not enough to satisfy expectations. This is where tensions started to grow. Stewart had stepped away from the high-pressure environment of NASCAR team ownership after selling his Cup team. He wanted to focus on racing for enjoyment, spending time with his family, and supporting his drag racing efforts with his wife, Leah Pruitt. He did not want to spend his time in an environment of frustration and complaints about performance. Schatz, on the other hand, was still deeply competitive. At 48 years old, he did not view himself as done. He still believed he could win at the highest level, and losing was never acceptable to him. When two competitive people with different mindsets come together, friction is inevitable. Schatz wanted to push harder, demand more, and keep fighting for wins. Stewart wanted a more relaxed environment, where fun and enjoyment were part of the balance. The two approaches clashed. According to many observers, their partnership lasted longer than expected, only because of the mutual respect they shared. Eventually, though, the breaking point arrived, and Stewart decided to move Schatz out of the seat. Kerry Madsen stepped in as a replacement driver for Stewart's sprint car toward the end of the season. Madsen had already shown he could win in Stewart-owned equipment before, back when the car carried the number 14. This made the transition smoother, at least on the surface. But the fact that a long-standing relationship between Stewart and Schatz ended so suddenly shocked the sprint car world. Fans had followed their story for years, and seeing it unravel highlighted how even legends could not escape the harsh realities of racing competition. And that's all we have for today's episode. Don't forget to comment down your thoughts on this situation, and for more upcoming updates, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well.